Sacred attention therapy is an approach to liberation. The first liberation is from the conditioned self, psychology of early life. The second liberation is from the realization of the true nature, the fulfillment of oneself as a personality. And the third liberation is the liberation into the life of spirituality and spiritual practice. Sacred attention therapy, or SAT, is a meta-psychology because it embraces not only the physical, emotional, mental and energetic aspects of the human being, but also the spiritual and the transcendental. Therefore, it is uniquely placed to be an applied psychology through counselling and psychotherapy in the 21st century, in which human beings are more complex than ever before.
Welcome to the second in a series of interviews with Richard Harvey. My name is Rob Meager. Today's interview will discuss the lecture Resistance to Freedom from the Substantia lecture series. This lecture is available in written form in Bodhi Ocean, an ebook that is available on the books page of the Sacred Attention Therapy website. You can listen to the full recording of many of these lectures on the lectures page. And lastly, you can view many other interviews on the videos page of the Sacred Attention Therapy website and on our YouTube channel. The URL for our website is www.sacredattentiontherapy.com. And on our website, you can click on the YouTube channel icon to view our YouTube channel. And now a little bit of background about Richard Harvey. Richard is a psychospiritual psychotherapist and spiritual teacher. His work emerged out of the human potential movement of the 1970s. He trained with many teachers in humanistic and transpersonal approaches. He is the founder of Sacred Attention Therapy, a radical new approach for inner work in the 21st century that proposes a three-stage model of human awakening. He is the author of Your Essential Self and the Flight of Consciousness, among many other publications. He works with people all around the world, and his forthcoming book is entitled Your Sacred Calling. And I'd now like to invite Richard Harvey to come on screen.
Thank you, Robert. Hello.
Welcome. Good to be with you.
Yeah.
Now, you open this lecture, Resistance to Freedom, with the following statement. Quote, in the psychospiritual field, in life itself, there is truly only one resistance to truth and freedom. That resistance is called the ego self, or I. It begins, of course, when we are tiny, small in years and learning, trying to make it through tremendous obstacles and stay somehow true to an inherent sense of integrity, love, and wisdom. Our attachment to the I is based on our relying on the ego processes to survive. End quote. So my question is, does the I or the ego self have to be shed wholesale? Or can the ego self be integrated with the whole being, befriending, as it were? And if it does have to be shed wholesale, why?
In sacred attention work, we talk in terms of shedding the ego through different layers. The short answer is for freedom, which is absolute, there is a shedding of all non-reality. And since ego is the very source of non-reality, then yes, it must be, if not wholesale as a method, certainly complete, because you can't experience absolute freedom when there is some taint of non-reality or classically called bondage, limitation, point of view, preference, opinion, and so on, which is all partial. But in terms of dismantling ego or shedding ego, at this time in human evolution, I suggest that we're now in 21st century, therefore 120 years through the so-called birth of Western psychology and the dynamite of the 20th century revelation experience of separation, division, and violence to the soul. And that takes some very specialist, unique adaptation of traditional psychospiritual methods and innovations in order to heal. And my understanding, or my way of going about this, because it's so huge, it's so massive, is to begin by divesting ourselves of the childhood ego. That's to say, the ego that was created in or around by the 6th year, and which was calcified or refined through the socialization processes up to puberty, and then was the final nail in the coffin is the identifying with a philosophical standpoint, rebellion or conformism through the so-called adolescence and into the 20s and so on. So through these 3 periods, we, in a sense, rightly become a creation of ourselves out of our early conditioning, or a collision of our own self-identity with the early condition. And it's something that's very hard to relinquish, because you've been working for 21 years. You work at something for 21 years and someone says, you've got to drop all that, we don't even put it in your CV. You know, it's got to be entirely relinquished. Anyone's going to go, oh, you know, there's some way I can adapt this. Is there some way I can? And, you know, I've delivered talks when people in the audience collectively want to say, look, there's a place for the ego, but it's what I call the ego compromise. We don't want to give it up. And if you want absolute freedom, you have to give it up. There's no question. But I suggest doing it in a gentle way, in a non-reactive way that doesn't mean that clinging replaces the letting go. Mm-hmm. Do it in a way that you can sustain. So begin by letting go of the childhood ego. Most people identify with the condition of the first 5 years of life anyway. Examine those and complete or resolve those dilemmas or impasses. That way you will begin to loosen the hold of the childhood ego.
Mm-hmm. Now, following on from that, you share this, quote, freedom comes at a cost. The price is ourselves. We have to shed not only our conditioning and beliefs and point of view, we have to shed our attachment to ourselves, exactly what you were just sharing. Here's my question. Is it the perception of cost and paying the price that keeps people from wanting to go through the journey of self-discovery to freedom from their identified roles and stories? That's the question. Do you want me to repeat it?
No, no. I thought there was going to be an or. It's okay.
Oh, right. No.
We have, I think I'd say to people who are listening to us, think of your early identification with adventure books or storytelling, your favorite uncle or mother's telling a story, or maybe they told you these stories without looking at books, ideally. Maybe they read them to you, maybe later on watched TV and became attached to a certain character, and later on, and more likely these days, of course, movies and follow-up movies, this kind of thing. And you notice movies now have become serial movies. You don't tend to get one anymore, you get two, and now it's 3 and 4, and on they go. And the reason is because people become attached to some character or other, or maybe a group of characters. But these characters that through the storytelling or the movie or theatre we'll leave out because probably not, or poetry, whatever art form you say, are a reflected image within ourselves. They're a part of ourselves. They're a part of our psyche. They're a part of the psychology. And to these introjects or these aspects of personality, we become attached. It's actually no more or less than looking at a rock face or looking at the surface of the ocean from an aeroplane, looking into the sky and seeing a fascinating, attractive object which is changing because it's only air with moisture. In fact, there's no reality to any of these things, the white horses in the sea, or the line in the rock face, or the lines in the cross-section of a tree, of wood. But they're fascinating, they're interesting, and we're drawn towards them. And it's the same within ourselves, and then reflected out in the story, and then they become this substantial, essential thing. What would I be without my identification with Batman? Or some romantic hero or idealized figure. Now the psyche and character and personality, which are expressions of that, are no more nor less than that. It's a continually changed series of lines, much more like the sky than like the cross-section of wood, much more like waves in the sea than anything that's inflexible, unchanging, and yet we hold on to it. I'm this kind of guy, I'm this kind of being. And then it seems that to give it up is a great cost. To give it up is actually a very small price to pay for freedom itself, and for the revelation that your liberation lies beyond your identification with a small identity that is defined by division and separation. Freedom's much more than that. It's not a big cost.
I'd like to pick up on that, and it's as if you intuit where I'm going next, and those who have been watching these interviews for a while know that you know nothing of what I'm going to ask you of your lectures.
I've never met you before.
Right, exactly. You share an important message as you approach the halfway point, and you've already been speaking to it, but I want to highlight it. And here's what you say. Quote, "Let me also say this, and I will continue to say it as many times as needed. Unless you overcome your psychological limitations, the spiritual life proper is not possible for you. You cannot be in the kindergarten and the university at the same time. You cannot do both or be both." And so my question is, what are these psychological limitations you're speaking of in that passage from the lecture?
Psychological limitations are attachments that are developed through the self-identity, the very idea that you are separate from all things, fundamental journey through dependence in the first years of life are set you into a position where we are Robert or Richard or whomsoever, and this out here, the rest of it. There's these two fields, and you don't believe a word of it when you're 1, 2, or 3, of course, but by the time you're 3.5 going into 4 and then 5, you better believe it, otherwise you're a pretty weird kid. There's a few weird kids around, we may have been weird kids, but there's a point at a stage of development where it's been drummed into you so hard that you stand alone with certain preferences and are defined and definable as this kind of separate being, and it's as if the applause comes in, he's growing up or something, this sort of idea. What we're trying to do, of course, is to grow down. So when we grow down instead of up, we see that we are kind of like some sort of flying thing that's actually stuck on the ground with anchors or something. You have to let go of all of these bindings, all of these ties. These ties are the attachments that keep you in himsa, in habit, in attachment, in a repetitive life pattern over which you have to kind of sing a song, or you have to kind of take a magic potion, or you have to in some way involve yourself in sort of hypnotism and fascination just to bear the fact that it's repeating all the time, and it's that awful. Most people's lives are merely repetitive. I mean, the pattern can be this big or even this big, but it's not very big in relationship to the whole spectrum of existence that's possible. And it's really quite unbearable, which is why in therapy, we say sometimes you'll wind up feeling like this, and then if it's working, you'll be feeling worse. A year or so later, when you go deep into inner work, you don't expect to feel better. If you do, you're probably not lasting, and you're not going to carry on with it or reap the full benefit from therapy and inner work. You expect to feel worse, but as you start to feel worse, you kind of peel off or away from the being who's feeling that. It's like, well, this feeling worse is beginning to be behind me in some way, and then something else, maybe terrifying, it's certainly unknown to me. I don't know where it's going, but this is seeding somehow. And it's that misery, it's that existential angst, it's the depression, it's the repressed anger and immense sadness that you went through in childhood, which probably wasn't acknowledged. Or maybe you brought some of it in, or maybe both, or maybe, but in any case it was there, and people were unable to receive or embrace it in you. So attachment to all of these things are what I'm talking about there, because it's such a great image, I'll say it again, if you're crossing the chasm of fire on a hair bridge, the Sufi image of crossing a chasm of fire on the hair bridge, you can look neither to left nor right, and if you only have the smidgen of an attachment to self-identity, separation and vision, the simple reason they're not real, they're not true, they're not authentic, it's not genuine. We say it every way possible. We're not saying this is bad, this is good, we're just saying this isn't real. And when you're crossing the hair bridge, you better be centered, and it better be absolutely authentic. And you can't enter that spiritual fire, therefore, and survive. The hair bridge is your means of survival, as it were, without that perfect balance. So that's what we're aiming for.
Almost at the end of the lecture, you say, quote, "Surrender of your delusions is inevitable, but also critical." And my question is the surrender of our delusions, our early childhood conditioning, and more, is it inevitable in time, or is it inevitable in eternity?
when we talk of self-identification, separation, division, what we're saying is you are not an individual. What we're saying is everything in spirituality is impersonal business. It's not about self-aggrandizement. It's about, hey, I'm a spiritual teacher, I'm great, I know much more than you do, or I can see more, I'm more loving, or I'm more wise, or any of that sort of thing. It's that there is this ocean of wisdom, an ocean of love, and you and I are swimming in it, and it's not mine, and it's not yours, and it's not any person. So the relevance of within one life, any of this happening, is not the perspective that we're having. That's an individual perspective. That's a way of looking at spiritual practice or discipline that says, if I do this, I'll be more relaxed, I'll be a better human being, I'll be closer to Buddha or Jesus or God or something. And that's not it. It's truth. It's reality. God is reality itself. There isn't any other reality. Therefore, when we talk about surrendering delusion or transcending delusion being inevitable, it is to say that everything is bound towards the demise from which the new life that is absolutely genuine will spring. It's as certain as the bulb put in the ground becomes the plant that it is, the daffodil, the tulip, or the something or other. You know, whatever it is, it will become, that seed will become. And there's no messing with that. That's nature, and you're a human being, and I'm a human being. True nature of human beings is so extraordinary that it is utterly inevitable that delusion will be shed, because we are not delusion. You know, what we are is matters of truth. Figments of truth, shards of truth, of sun, so to speak. You know, a light shard, a light beam. That's what we are. So it is inevitable, critical because of the times, but inevitable because of our nature. And then in and of this particular time, listen, it matters and it doesn't matter. You know, these are crucial times, they're difficult. You know, I've just written a book which is based on what's happening at this time. So it's important in a sense, but we can also be clear that there is no time. So these difficult times, even if we try and compare and contrast them with other difficult times or less hard times or more peaceable time or some halcyon time where it was all great or it still will all be great, who cares in a way? Because in the spiritual realms, you're right, we occupy the eternal moment. It doesn't matter what's happening now, it just means it's equally important what was happening then and what will come to be. Because God, or the true reality, both was, is, and will be.
I'd like to end the interview with this quote, because it was an intriguing quote, which comes almost at the very end of the lecture. You say, quote, "For most of us, then, spiritual advancement is gradual and slow. However, the wayfarer does not have to make matters worse by not wearing shoes." End quote. What do you mean by the wayfarer does not have to make matters worse by not wearing shoes?
Did I say that, or was it a quote?
I thought you said it.
Okay.
It could have been a quote, but I thought it appears in the manuscript, and I'm pretty sure you said it. I can't be 100% sure if it was a quote.
The wayfarer, of course, is a term used in Sufi literature. I mean, it's very nice because it's difficult sometimes to talk about the devotee or the student or the follower, or the aspirant or the adept or something. You know, what we're going to call it. Sufis have this very nice way of calling everyone wayfarer, I guess, unless a sheikh or a master or something. I guess wayfarer. Maybe the sheikhs and the masters are wayfarer too. I don't really know. I don't remember that, but I think that brings up for me now is I talk to so many people and I want to say, look, I have this sort of E-type thing. The E-type is these first, second, third stages of awakening. They're like, get through this part of the journey, get onto this one, this vehicle, there's this other vehicle, and these are viable vehicles. I mean, they explain, they analyze, they discuss, they're intelligent emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, all the way through. And if you've got a better idea or a better manual for doing, totally open is not dogma, but the idea of wearing shoes recalls to me the idea that so many people embark on spiritual disciplines that don't really work very well, and also psychological ones. Maybe they don't work because they're not applied or they're not heart engaged, rather than anything intrinsically wrong with it in and of itself. Who knows? But I do know that in sacred attention we have great detail to what needs to happen in order to awaken to the second stage of the heart, which in itself is profound, and then puts into context specifically the heart preparation for a spiritual life. Don't see that so often, even in traditional things, that kind of detail, that kind of explanation, and what kind of practices go with those different levels. Now, I also take the point that in a sense, there are no levels and so on, and if I was talking to Advaita Vedanta people, go, yeah, no levels, I got it, But in the 21st century, it's a kind of remedial time. We're so childlike and childish, and there's even a sort of regression of the psyche somehow. And of course, it's in the interest, it would seem, of politics and corporate businesses and so on to be like this. Because if people didn't really need so very much in the material world, which what do we really need it for? Then suddenly we're not so controllable, and the mass of the population has been a terrifying vista for people who crave power for hundreds of years. That this is a constant over the last 2,500 years at least. How do we control all these people, like animals? And the answer is, I don't want to be controlled, neither do you want to be controlled. But if we can find, an E-type Jaguar as opposed to some old wind-up vehicle, and we can get through this remedial content of the psyche to awaken into the heart, to awaken into the spirit, why not use it? This is what I try to put together. This is what we're talking about some of the time, sacred attention work, and absolutely specifically what needs to happen for you to get the most benefit from psychological practices in order to awaken emotionally and spiritually, and that you can't do it otherwise. I mean, that's the linchpin of this. It'd be lovely to say people are all a mix. Actually, there's lots of lovely people in the world today anyway who don't do any of this stuff. And it's true in a sense. But in another realistic sense, unless you transcend your childhood ego, what choice do you have in the world to behave maturely or to behave heartfully or make responsible choices? So there's the shoes.
Wonderful place to leave it. When we come together the next time, Richard will explore the second lecture in this 6-part lecture series. The title of the lecture is Poor or Rich, a discussion of vision. And I look forward to it. Thank you, Richard.
So, thank you.
Good to be with you.
Till next time, Robert.
Bye-bye.
Bye.